thank you, Mark, for that introduction, and thank you guys for making it here on the final day of what I'm sure has been an interesting but tiring event, as they always are. So as Mark said, I'm working on a partnership team. I've recently moved from London, as you can probably tell by the accent, to our HQ in California to take on a more kind of travel and sort of focused role. And so when I'm not explaining the benefits of cricket to my US colleagues, that is really what I'm doing. And working with a bunch of you guys who we're already engaged with, I'm really kind of trying to push forward how Google can work with a bunch of our different products, can work for you guys to hopefully provide something more kind of joined up and a connected experience, I guess, in every sense of the word. So Google and travel, what are we doing here? Where do we fit? What's our kind of background? So I guess when a lot of people think about Google and travel, the first thing they see or think of is this. Everyone know what this is? Self-driving car. Things that we spend a lot of time dodging around Mountain View. So this is actually a particularly kind of relevant photo for a number of reasons. The self-driving cars, a project that started very much as a sort of skunkworks Google X project, so in our kind of innovation incubator, if you like. And it really shows how we kind of went about the innovation and exploration phase of sort of product development. And after we'd driven sort of whatever it is, I think we're up to 2.5 million miles of actual driving and millions more simulated miles. So that the net result is that the brain, if you like, behind this has 300 years worth of driving experience, which those of you with a long commute will feel like you already have as well. But the net result is that it can cope with all of these unexpected scenarios. It's been through them, it's lived them, and so on. And it's done that by using one of our kind of recurring themes, if you like, of how we can help in this industry and a few others, of devices plus sensors plus cloud. So what does that mean? It's using the sensors. So you'll see on the top and on some of the older models, you would have seen basically what looks like a camera that's spinning around at very high speed, which is basically a LiDAR, as we call it, which is used to really, is essentially the car's eyes, look at what's going on around. So it's constantly taking in this data. We've used, obviously, a bunch of kind of machine learning and applied a bunch of simulations in our cloud and so on to kind of build a more intelligent brain. And then the device sort of side of things is, in this case, is basically the car and the kind of workings of the car. But it's something that applies across Google in terms of how the innovation works, but also this kind of model of like I said, devices and sensors and cloud. And this also kind of shows the transition, if you like. So this project, self-driving cars, was under Google X and has moved now into its own sort of business unit. It's now Waymo. It's now kind of graduated, if you will, to be a standalone organization, and has also started showing some kind of benefits to other parts of Google and other aspects that we're of the sort of technology stack, if you like, that we're working on. So the LiDAR unit that I mentioned, one of the challenges with emerging technology is it's always freakishly expensive to start with, as this was, and it was, I think we announced way back when that a few $100,000 of extra kit were required, bolted onto some of our early cars to do that. And now the price of that unit has fallen so much so that it's something that we're looking at putting into a number of sort of airport retail scenarios for looking at people movement around locations, that kind of thing. So it's the same technology, the same kind of high level approach, but really kind of applied into different ways. And that really is, I think, where if we get it right as Google, where we can really kind of help. This started off as something that is really kind of very unrelated to a lot of what we do. I mean, yes, it's travel. The aims were to kind of help those who can't drive. So in fact, the guy in this car is actually kind of legally blind. This is his first trip round Austin. So that was one of the aims, those who can't drive. The other was to reduce the I think 1.2 million road deaths there are a year. And the other one was to improve kind of quality of life. So the idea of you having your sort of commute just like in the kind of futuristic movies where you're sat there with your feet up, reading a book, which always sounds slightly weird. You're in a self-driving car, the kind of peak of technology, yet you're reading a bit of paper, but we'll come back to that later. But those were kind of the three aims. So right over one side of the kind of spectrum, but really kind of transitioning into some kind of real world and applicable solutions. So one of the other areas that I've heard a bit of talk about over the last few days, which is really interesting, really kind of encouraging. I was just saying to Mark how it feels like things have moved on a bit in terms of where the thinking is. But does anyone recognise what this is? It's another kind of, within Google at least, relatively famous graph. It's not heart rate before, after, and with coffee or anything like that. But this is applying some of our machine learning. So some of you may have heard of a company called DeepMind that Google acquired, famous for playing a slightly obscure Forest Asian board game, AlphaGo, beating the world champion, etc., etc. But this graph is actually power usage at Google data centers without DeepMind applying their machine learning benefits, with them applying and then turning it back off again. So again, like another kind of real world example of something that I often think is a bit abstract. There's a lot of sort of, yes, big data and machine learning and how we're going to, what does that do, what does that mean? Here's like, again, a real world example of something that from the Google side started off as, let's try and solve a sort of big problem. So if we can reduce, as we did here, the amount of energy required to cool our data centers by 40%, that has huge impact on, on potentially not just cost, but climate change and so on, whether you believe that or not. And so on. So where does that help in the kind of the travel world? Two kind of examples of some sort of slightly abstract technology, hopefully moving their way into real world. And these, some of you may have seen this or similar slide before, but this is kind of what we got asked for really from a lot of our airline partners. This was kind of what they were coming to us with a problem of, where historically our engagement with them had been more around selling ads, and it had been, frankly, often a very kind of linear transaction. Like, yes, if I advertise flights to the Bahamas on Google, I sell more flights to the Bahamas. Pretty basic stuff, and timings and so on, and it gets a bit more. My colleagues on that side won't thank me for calling it basic, but it's a pretty direct line in terms of cost benefits, that kind of thing. But what they were looking for, the airlines were looking for, is kind of more from Google. You have lots of interesting technology to us, AR, VR, the IoT, etc. A lot of things that we've had conversations about over the last couple of days. How can we help? And these were the kind of three things that the airlines came to us with, and then the three areas at the top, at the bottom rather, in terms of pre, during, and post-flight. And obviously there's one big challenge that hopefully many of you in this room are going to solve for us, is that a lot of Google products are built very much with connectivity in mind. And I think it's very easy to kind of live within our Google bubble, where everyone has their sort of gigabit Ethernet connection and 100% cell phone coverage, and everything's fine, and not really think about when you're up there. And even, to be honest, connectivity in aircraft, in North America, is obviously way ahead of where it is in Europe, and that's something that must admit, I've suddenly become very confident with and comfortable about, is the fact that when I go on a plane, I'm going to have connectivity even just as a passenger, whereas again in Europe we're still kind of behind. But it's really starting to have an effect on how we can actually implement some of our products. And we do have, I should say, another kind of one of our other aims as a company is to help what we call our next billion users. So the emerging markets where they're bandwidth constrained, they're semi-offline, and maybe you've got bandwidth caps, whatever it may be. So a bunch of our products now have that kind of those capabilities being baked into them. But obviously, no surprises, the more connected users, passengers are, the better it is and the easier it is for us. So one of the kind of first things we looked at is all of the Google products, app services, whatever you want to call them, that affect travel. And there's a huge range that we probably don't often think about that either are being used now or could and should be directly or otherwise. So that Google Trips, Google Flight Search, Nearby is something that technology that we're seeing increasingly used in the sort of airports and around to essentially advertise features and services to passengers. So it could be as simple as showing that you have an app, ensuring that the passengers have downloaded the IFE app before they get on board. Using devices for payments, and even things like Google Maps and Google Now. So some of you may often, as use this example, often people's first experience of Google Now is they've booked a flight, it's gone to their Gmail, the confirmation's gone to their Gmail account, and then a few weeks later, their phone pops up with a message saying, you need to leave for the airport now because there's heavy traffic on whichever road it is you need to get to the airport. And that kind of first time that happens, for often people is often like, wow, that's really useful. And then suddenly you kind of become dependent on it. But it's another good example of where we're tying in this kind of contextual awareness. You know that I'm here in this hotel. You know what the traffic is like on the road. You know what time I've got to be at the airport. You know whether my flight's on time or not, et cetera, et cetera. So we already have a bunch of areas where we're working in and sort of helping, albeit not directly in the travel space. Excuse me. A lot of that is related to Android. So we have kind of two core platforms. I talk about devices a lot, and Android is one of those devices and is moving its way into the IoT world with Android Things. So some of you may have seen some announcements there at our developer conference last month. But Android has a huge presence. We're now up to 2 billion Thursday active users. So there are 2 billion devices being actually used out there, not 2 billion that have ever existed and are now in a dumpster somewhere, but 2 billion devices. So huge presence on that side. Millions of new activations. And to sort of complement that is our App Store, Google Play. So largest application distribution mechanism in the world. I'm sure many of you are using it. This hopefully is not a surprise to any of you, but a hugely popular platform. And something that we turned to a variety of different form factors. So as we often kind of refer to these, pick your glowing rectangle. Whatever it is you're trying to do, whether you're using a smartphone, whether it's sort of tablet convertible form factor, whether you want to use one of these that you can drive a 747 over while you're kind of scanning cargo on and off, whether it's a point of sale device, even you may have heard again recently Android Auto, Android Wear, Android TV. So the idea is you've got a common platform, and that in a way, great. How does that help me? First of all, it means that you've got 2 billion people out there using it. So if you're doing anything that is in any way kind of passenger facing in terms of your application, then you kind of can't ignore it. The benefit is it's the kind of right one to run anywhere on this different kind of size glowing rectangle. So for what we've seen is a lot of companies who have, they have to do something or will have to do something consumer facing. They can use the same skill set, same tools, same development, same approaches on their internal, whatever it may be, asset tracking tools and so on. So it creates a nice kind of highly available, consistent platform for us and for you guys to hopefully innovate on top of. And our aim really at this level is to take away a lot of the pain for you guys, to tick the box in terms of security and manageability and so on, and not have you guys have to think about all of these kind of frankly boring and painful pieces of the puzzle, and let you guys focus on exactly why are we trying to get this device out there in the first place? Like what is the business problem that we're trying to solve? The problem is not people don't have devices, so we want to give them devices to do stuff with. The problem is maybe we're losing X, Y, Z. We're taking too long doing something, whatever it may be. So we started with that. We then took a look at what people were doing on board, and I'm sure you've all seen various different versions of this slide, and everyone's probably got a different set of numbers to go with it. Our kind of takeaway was really that there's still, there's a bunch of work that we can do in flight. Connectivity helps make our lives a lot easier, but there's a huge amount that we can still do on that side of things. So And again, you may have seen some of our work we've done on this one before, but taking the, you've probably not seen that before, but we've looked at taking it from the into the Seatback and trying to provide this sort of personalised experience. So going from, I always have to say this, we're not starting our own airline, don't worry. There are a few people at Google, I'm sure, who have their own planes, but they're not for mass transit. So we're trying to take it from the, you have a seat and you have this nice interactive seat experience. What we always get asked for is, this is great, but what I want is some Google apps or some of the third-party apps in Google Play in the Seatback, and we've seen some airlines kind of implement a lot of kind of consumer apps, but often they have to get a kind of customized version. So what we're trying to get to is a stage where it's much easier, a much more prevalent platform across the Seatback. It gives you the opportunity to then tie in things like the sort of personalization angle that you can get from your device. Your device is already tied to you. It has your identity effectively attached to it. And there's a bunch of technology that we kind of have already that makes it relatively easy for you to say, here's my device, here's essentially a device that I'm a guest on, pass my identity onto them for a given period of time, and clear it at the end. And so we end up with this nice personalized experience where I have all of my content, my data, and so on and so forth on the Seatback, on another device, or whatever the kind of context may be. But the net result is it's me, and it removes some of the kind of frictions that you guys have probably seen in things like payment and things like having to take people through sign-up flows and all these kind of things. We want to remove it, make it easy for you guys to focus on the fun stuff. So kind of going beyond that Seatback, and that is hugely helped by having connectivity. As soon as there's connectivity to the Seatback, for us that's great news, and that helps us kind of play back in our more traditional space, I guess. But there's obviously a huge kind of gamut of other areas. So nose to tail, this whole phrase, but we've had a bunch of interest around and people trialing various scenarios of using things like an Android wearable to take orders from a Seatback for a cabin crew on board. All these kind of things that seemed maybe quite far-fetched a little while ago are now becoming much more possible. Likewise, I'm always kind of keen to mention that yes, there's a lot of sort of customer-facing, very exciting things that we can do, but there's also the slightly more mundane in many ways, airline ops side of things and tracking of, let's say, asset tracking and various kind of back office processes that we can help with. Integrating with airports is becoming increasingly key, and a bunch of work we've got with some big new airport developments going on there, and tying it up with a bunch of our sort of device and signage products and that kind of thing, which I'll come on to in a bit. I guess the main thing from our side is that more connectivity, great, makes all these things a lot easier, tries to tie into this, what I'll come on to in a bit, there's more than just app checking, and kind of really kind of trying to put some intelligence behind what it is that the passenger gets to see. And so having every screen intelligent, if you like, is one of our ways of looking at it. So this smart signage, which obviously applies on the ground, but is very much driven by often what's going on in the air, or allows you to do something here that affects what's going on in the air. So this example is actually using Chrome OS, so another operating system of ours, but again a smart signage solution that again you can tie in similarly to the onboard personalization piece. You can tie in the idea of when someone approaches this screen, you could already have some kind of context of who they are. You can apply all kinds of rules to essentially make their experience with that screen easier, or have them take some content or whatever it may be with them on their device, that kind of thing. One of the kind of first steps on this road is often the sort of mapping the airport, and this often starts with, how do I get my blue dot on Google Maps to be more accurate? Because at the moment it's the size of the whole airport when I'm indoors and no one knows where they are, and I keep losing people getting from gate 1 to gate 2, and I'm an airport with 10 gates. How is that possible? But apparently it is, and I'm sure I'll be that person at some point, but touch wood, not yet. So the sort of first stage, like I say, is very much we'll put beacons everywhere, and we'll start with getting the blue dot ready and getting that accurate. But what we've seen is that kind of moving into really an extension of what is currently delivered on the aircraft around, here's your connecting gate information, that kind of thing. Tying up that with a map, and also we've had a few examples, some of you might have seen, like San Jose Airport did some work with us using augmented reality to basically navigate people around their airport. So taking a Google device using something called Project Tango, which is our kind of depth sensing camera technology, if you like. So the idea there is rather than navigating by sort of lat and long and knowing what's around you, it navigates around an indoor building in very much the way you do. It can see the table, so it tells you to walk around the table, kind of thing, rather than the table is plotted on a map and it knows where it is on the map. So it's much more kind of human, if you like, in many ways. But tying that to on the aircraft, and what we keep hearing from airlines is we want people to be able to see the route they're going to go. To tie in some of our other technology, like Google Translate is a great example of something that really kind of can help in an airport environment. Some of you may have seen you can now use Google Translate with your camera. So you just literally, which is a phenomenally useful tool when you're in somewhere dubious and you need to read a menu and check you're not eating parts of an animal you don't want to be. But you can just hold up the camera, translate the menu, problem solved. Using that in an airport context is something that we've seen be particularly useful, and all that functionality is available in a very simple to use API on our cloud side. So if you say, great, what we want to do is add in the ability to read text and translate it into any language, super easy to do. You can embed that in your app. We're not precious about it being our app or your app or anything like that. We kind of recognise that people have their own preferences, and so very easy to start tying these things in, again, with Google Maps, something you can embed in your app and so on. So we start moving towards this much more kind of connected travel experience, using on the side there these funny shaped devices, using our various kind of services and products and things like, we haven't even mentioned, like Daydream, our augmented reality, and Nearby and beacons and so on. Using all these combined with search and the cloud platform, really kind of start presenting this kind of fully connected experience. And thanks to the work of many of you in the room, it means we can now do a lot of that in the air as well. Now, one of our more recent, so getting on now, announcements is Google Assistant, which is really kind of a nice, simple way of tying a lot of that together. And again, I'm always conscious that we sometimes talk a lot about Google, about all of these sort of weird and wonderful sounding technologies that we've got that are sort of so abstract and so far away from reality. You're like, that's great, but how am I going to use it? Google Assistant is a great example of bringing a bunch of that technology together to provide you with a really kind of easy to use, conversational interface. With our sort of Google Smarts, if you will. So, this example is about tying in something else, obviously very travel related, is Google Flight Search, and we're obviously seeing huge sort of uptake on that as a tool for searching and going forward to booking travel. And you'll see in this, well, hopefully you can see in this example, the sort of conversation is around, show me flights to Thailand, then show me points of interest, and the key thing is really this contextual aspect. So over here is the next sort of question is always related to the last one. It's just like in a conversation. You don't start every sentence with preamble to say, show me the points of interest in Thailand. It's like, just show me the points of interest. It's obviously Thailand. I've just asked for flights there. So we kind of keep this conversational aspect going, and it has this awareness of where you are geographically and so on and so forth. So, and obviously the multi-language support that we touched on. So Assistant's becoming a really kind of useful kind of tool in terms of the sort of wider travel experience. And even Google Home is probably again a kind of headline grabbing and really kind of obvious way to see how Assistant can help. I've got to say, I think it's great. I think my wife hates it because when we're sort of getting ready to go somewhere, and she'll always ask me, "What's the weather like? How long will it take to get somewhere?" And I always reply with, "Hey Google, how long will it take us to get to where we're going? What is the weather like in whatever?" Which doesn't always go down that well. So I'd sort of urge to proceed with caution on that front. But it is phenomenally useful. It does provide you all these kind of contextual, sensible answers to what you're trying to do. And the key thing is now we're opening this up to third parties, so you can start inserting your own. You can start sort of taking the conversation on from whatever kind of point of entry it is. So one of our again very simplistic but quite amusing examples that we showed at Google I/O was Domino's. So Domino's Pizza, you can just say, "Hey Domino's, I want to order a pizza," and it'll say, "Hey Max, oh great, do you want to order your easy order? I think it says your last order, your last destination, or do you want something else?" And you can kind of say, "Yes, I want a margarita with anchovies," or whatever obscure thing I want. Done. And you can have that, it's conversational. There's no need to download the app, which is, again, something that I think a lot of people see as a challenge in that the average user downloads basically net zero apps every month. People are not kind of going to download necessarily the Domino's app just to order a pizza. In the same way, they're not necessarily going to download an airport app if they're connecting through there sort of once in a blue moon, or maybe even an airline app if they're not a frequent flyer there. So there's some areas there where we can hopefully help, and it can lead, in the Domino's example, it could lead to a transaction, and then on to you sort of suggesting they do download their app if you're going to be back regularly. But it helps again with removing that friction from the kind of passenger experience, removing their kind of jumping into sign-up flows and that kind of thing. And what we're really kind of trying to get across is this traditional, if you like, from the left, Google aim of answer. The first time you interact with Google, it's often you're answering a question, asking a question, you're typing it into a white box, and you get an answer back. And that was very much where we started, and even that is kind of evolving in that now, somewhat surprisingly, to me at least, 20% of our mobile search queries are voice-based. So we really are seeing 20% of people speaking into their phone, which seems like it's something that's taken a while to get there. But again, even that aspect is changing. Anticipate is more this Google Now type experience I talked about. So telling you that you need to, providing you with information ahead of time that we think may be useful, based on often some context. And then enable is really this providing you with this information in order to enable you to make better, hopefully smarter decisions. And that's really kind of our kind of wider aim as sort of Google as a whole in many ways. Now, I just want to take a quick minute or two to talk about one other aspect of sort of connectivity and travel and so on that's come up recently due to this question mark. So we've had a huge amount of sort of inbound conversations around what we can do to help with any kind of potential extension to electronics ban, the current electronics ban, and a whole bunch of potentials, if you like, that may happen in this area. And I guess it seems like from conversations over the last couple of days that no one really knows what's going to happen, or at least I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm not going to try and predict the future. Politics has taught us not to try and do that, if anyone was following the UK election yesterday. So we're not going to try and predict what's going to happen. What we are going to say is that there's actually a very, very easy way around this from our perspective, and it's kind of funny watching how it's panned out at Google kind of internally for Google own use, is that we have a huge percentage of Chromebook users. So for anyone who's used the Chromebook, if you've got kids in the States, they're probably already using them. So it's built around speed, security, simplicity, super lightweight OS, boots in 10 seconds, You enroll it with a sort of corporate management solution. So it has built-in device management. We heard yesterday about using device management tools. No need to do that. Already built in. You configure it to do to have various policies and so on. And there are a variety of shapes, sizes, as ever, glowing rectangles. The key things really are that you've got support for all your productivity tools. So I can use it. I can edit my Office documents and so on. It's got, like I said, the kind of policies on there that Google corporate engineering, corporate IT wants on there. We can have corporate branding. So if you're an airline, you want it coloured red, white, or blue, we can do that. Always up to date. No hassles about concerns about whether it's up to date from a security perspective. You again control that from the management tool. And like I say, cloud ready, so if it's connected, the experience is much better. Offline, I can still stick a USB key in and do my editing. The key thing really with the Chromebook is completely built around sort of the premise of security. So that the way that we've been setting it up in this context is that you can let someone use the device for a while. As soon as they exit that session, everything on the device is wiped and it basically returns to this kind of standard, what we call public session mode. So there's no concerns about GE using the device on one flight and leaving all their files for Boeing to read, for Rolls-Royce to read on the next flight. So hopefully, anyway. So who knows what's going to happen? I mean, like I said, we kind of feel like we're kind of covered internally. So we actually internally have something we call Chromebook Grab and Go. So this is this idea where if I was flying to, say, our London office from here, and I didn't want to take my laptop, couldn't take my laptop, whatever, I could just, if I was able to borrow one on an aircraft, so I was given a loaner one, and I could use that. When I get to our office in London, I can just pull out a device there, and I can log in there, and I carry on using it. And obviously, all my data is in the cloud, etc., etc. So from our perspective, it's a very straightforward sort of way to kind of mitigate any impact of band. And it's something that some of you may remember we actually did when we first launched Chromebooks. I think this was way back in 2011, where we had a promotion with Virgin America and with our friends at GoGo, where we were basically handing them out at the gate for loans on an aircraft. So, if that's something that happens or that gets extended, I should say, then obviously we think we're pretty well placed, and we've been working with a bunch of some of the people here and some of the kind of security logistics partners to make sure that that's in place. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to finish on that. Feel free to drop me a note with any kind of follow-up questions, but I think we've got maybe a couple of minutes now. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. We haven't got much time, so we're going to get into the coffee break and the rest of the session. We can maybe take one question, and then Max will be available in the coffee break for any more questions.
I'm just curious, you talked about this concept of integrating your own device with the Seatback device, and after listening to the speakers yesterday, I came away with my own conclusion that Seatback devices might only be around for another 10 or 15 years maybe. Do you have an opinion on that? I mean, if I were an airline, I'd probably be wanting people to just bring their own devices and not have to worry about integrating with vendor devices and install them. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think, it's been kind of interesting working with that world from a Google perspective, in that you're right, the timescales, they may only be around for 10, 15 years, but that's often how long they last from new to kind of expiration anyway, right? And whereas in our world, it's generally a smartphone that lasts, I think someone mentioned yesterday, if it's more than 2 years old, then it's kind of obsolete. So that's been a bit of a challenge. That said, I think, again, from a passenger perspective, I'd love it if they stuck around, because I quite like having a screen I can watch while I'm working on my laptop. And I think it's, in a way, it's been a bit of maybe a bit of a missed opportunity, and maybe connectivity to the Seatback will help enable, in that if, at the moment it's seen as this big cost, and it is a big cost, and it gets a huge bit of weight that gets flown around with great fuel cost and great maintenance cost and all this kind of stuff. If that screen was a bit smarter, and if that was more up to date, and if it could do could do more in terms of, it could be something that is ended up being a sort of revenue generator rather than a cost, then I think they have they definitely have a future. But I think that's where the kind of move needs to come, and it's going to be down to obviously different airlines have different models around whether whether they're kind of down the end of trying to kind of strip out cost or kind of going for just kind of throwing all amounts of luxury and facilities at the passengers. So that's not for us to kind of push. But I'd love to. I'd like to think that we can help make that easier by a number of the main suppliers adopting Android and that kind of thing. Hopefully makes it easier for that scenario that I was talking about of having the apps that people want in the seatback rather than having to bring their own device. But we'll see. We'll see any potential electronics ban extension kind of throws a bit of a curveball into that as well. But yeah, we're back into put it in the future again.
Thank you very much. Let's give Max one more round of applause.
Thank you.